Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR and Sirius XM, channel 141. This is the Insight segment. I'm Harold Fisher. During this Thanksgiving week, we're examining issues that are in keeping with the season. And tonight, we're having a conversation for parents about your children. Now, for some of us, we live in a season of abundance. And even if we really can't or shouldn't afford it, we're giving our children some pretty expensive gifts. We may even unintentionally teach them about high-end lifestyles without giving them a full understanding about the sacrifices that come with it. Are we teaching our children to be ungrateful or perhaps even entitled? How do we teach our children to be thankful? We have a lot to talk about tonight, and I have some great guests on this program. My guests are family strategist Charlotte Avery. She and her husband are raising 7 children. And Randy Pike, youth pastor at Zion Church in Greenbelt, Maryland. Randy and his wife have 2 teen boys and a 19-year-old young lady. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining this conversation.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you for having us, man. We definitely appreciate it.
Well, I'm sure that both of you have some advice for those who are starving and trying to figure out, what did I do with my children? Why can't they act right? What have I done wrong? Listen, so let me ask you, when it comes to raising thankful children, Charlotte, where did you start?
I started really young. You can't start teaching the attitude of gratitude when your kids get older. You've got to start teaching them very, very, very young. So, I started teaching them with just, the basics when they were toddlers, and they started learning how to talk, just being able to say thank you and also modeling thankfulness and gratitude in front of them.
Mm-hmm. Was that hard to do? I mean, it's one thing to teach them basic manners, please, thank you, and you're welcome. And I think we all got that. But when do you believe that they really started to understand what thank you meant?
I would say probably around the ages of 2 or 3, because when they started receiving things, even just like the little things, when your kids are younger, the little things they cost less money, but the little things mean so much to them. And when we just started giving them little things, like for my son, we would always give him a Matchbox car or something like that. And to see his face light up and to hear him say, "Thank you, mommy. Thank you, daddy." That's when we really started hearing it and teaching them the most, is because they were now receiving things from us, but because we modeled thank you and gratitude in front of them, they started, even just their facial expressions showed that they were thankful.
Brandy, same question for you. When and how did you start trying to teach your children about being thankful, to understand what gratitude is?
I think it was it's kind of in tiers. I kind of agree with Charlotte as it relates to starting young with showing them, what it means to be thankful by modeling. Hey, when you get something, you say thankful because of this. Sometimes, we won't even move until the word thank you was heard. Just teaching manners and standing on that. A lot of our kids today, they'll say, "I'm standing 10 toes down. I'm standing on business with this." Like, we stood our business on making sure you knew what it meant to say thank you. You knew what it meant to use your manners and be respectful. And then as they get older, we invited them into some of the processes of purchasing things. Because some of the times we kind of put things together as it relates to when we purchase stuff. We kind of put value on it. So what we started to do was we would give them their own money to go purchase things for themselves. And I can recall going to the mall with them and just being in the store with them, and it was time for them to buy something, and they would count their money and they would look up at me, but like, "Well, it costs this, I don't got this much." And it was like, well, don't look at me, man. This is what it is, And so showing them, like I said, and getting them involved with the process of purchasing things and showing the value of things and how much something would cost when it's theirs. And I tend to think that when you have ownership of something, you tend to be more thankful when something is given, because the cost of what is given, and not even the cost, but the sacrifice that it took to get it.
Right.
So teaching how to earn money, not just to be like, I'm gonna just give it to you, so, just the process of how life works, and I tend to think when you know how something works, you tend to be more grateful for it when you get it.
Yeah. Charlotte, you have 7 perfect children.
Ooh, that's living right there, man.
No, but okay. I appreciate that.
Lovely time. That's a lot of date nights.
That's right. How about that?
That's a lot of weight there. That's a lot of weight.
Yeah. Talk to me about any experiences that you've had with any of the children when you noticed that there was a little slip, there was a bit of selfishness, of something that may have happened that let you know as a parent, I need to tighten up on this because maybe they're acting a little spoiled.
So there was that's a really, really great question. So there was a time when we were getting sneakers. And so in my house, like, I don't believe that I'm not a person that feels like, well, just because I got one child something that I have to get everybody something. They have to, like, it really goes on a case by case basis, right?
Yeah.
And so I remember one time we had gone to the store to buy a pair of sneakers for one of our children. And he was playing basketball at the time. So the shoes weren't just something that he wanted. They were actually really something that he needed. And but I just remember in the process coming home and him not really, first of all, he didn't say thank you. It was almost as if he were entitled to these basketball shoes. And basketball shoes, good quality basketball shoes, are not inexpensive. And it dawned on me because usually he's very gracious and saying thank you, whatever. But this particular time, it was almost as if, well, you owe me these shoes. You know what I'm saying? Like, he wasn't saying that, but just his body language and just some of his reactions, even in dealing, and it was something that he said to one of my children. And it really, like, I don't want to say it vexed me, because vexed is a really big little word, but it really rubbed me the wrong way. And I had to tell him, I was like, I just need you to understand that you didn't have to get these shoes.
Right.
I said, you didn't have to get them. I said, because even though you're getting these shoes, your other shoes still fit you. You're just getting these shoes right now, one, because they were a really good price.
Yeah. And
two, you're going to need them down the road. I said, but we didn't have to buy you anything. And then I said to him, I said, I said, this is not, and I do this sometimes. I do reverse psychology on my kids. I said, you know what? I said, but this is not you. It's me. I said, this is really not your fault. This is my fault. I said, I said, and you've taught me that I need to learn the error of my ways. I said, because clearly there's something that has happened that makes you think that we have to get you these shoes. I said, we don't have to get you anything, especially if it's something that you already have. It might not be in the condition that you want, but we don't have to. And he just looked at me as if I hurt his feelings. And I was like, what is wrong with you? I said, because you're the one. He said, well, you're getting on me and blah, blah, blah. I said, but not one time did I hear you say, thank you, Mom. I said, not one time did I hear you say, thank you, Dad. I said, because even though I took you to shop for these shoes, I said, your dad works hard for our family. I said, we both work hard for our family in different ways. I said, so money doesn't fall out of the sky, and I had to tell him, I mean, I really had to check him. And I remember that, and I tell you what, I don't remember any other time after that he did not say thank you. And because it was such a really great learning lesson for him, he then started dealing with my other children about their lack of gratitude when certain things came around, because the oldest is always the guinea pig.
Yes.
Yeah. And Randy, here's the thing too, and this kind of piggybacks on what Charlotte was saying. Look, as a youth pastor, you interact with a lot of young people.
Yeah.
And I just wonder, when you see a child who is showing signs of being entitled, showing signs of not being grateful or thankful, what does that look like, and how do you address it? Because you have your own flock, but they're not your children.
Right. I think from my perspective, it'll look like it'll be down to they'll have their cliques with certain kids or hang out with certain kids. They'll have it where certain kids may say something that quote unquote the cooler kids may not get, and I'll address it. If I can, candidly speaking, I'll say pretty much, when you die, none of this is going to matter. When you, and I'll take it a step further. I was considered, growing up, at times I was considered, not so much somebody that was cool because I didn't have all the latest fashion, and I
thought you always had the swag. I
had the swag with what my parents had to give. I was definitely one of those shoppers that, if some of our listeners are listening now who would have to go to Sears or if you're from the Maryland area, you have to go to Zayre.
Yes. Oh, Lord.
In Landover Mall, there were certain stores that we could not go to.
Right.
And Payless was one of them. But I say all that to say,
Payless.
And my father would be like, he'd be acting like we in the candy store, like, pick which one you want. I said, they got a sale today. They got 2 for $19.99. I was like, jocks, here we come. But I'll say all that to say, I'll tell them I'm a product of what you have right now won't always be. And I had not colleagues. I say it like they were my coworkers when growing up. I have friends who are now, and I can confidently say it. Some that have passed away, some that are incarcerated, some are asking me. The same very people that made fun of me are asking me about job opportunities, and it all came back to feeling this sense of entitlement, like I'm taking pride in what I have. I'm taking pride in, I deserve to have this. I'm taking pride in what my parents are providing for me, all to realize that one day you're going to have to provide for yourself. And, it kind of goes hand in hand. If you're not in a position to realize that it's not always going to be like that, you'll have a more sense of, I need to work and earn what I need to get versus I'm always going to be in a position where my parents are going to be providing for me. So, I think it's, I think it's major that you allow your kids to work, to see the benefits of their labor. So they can work hard for something and so they can have it. So they're not always, quote unquote, living off of you. Our job as parents is to teach them how to go, to teach them how to pretty much survive once they leave this house, because they're not going to be here forever. I can tell you that right now. Right. Me and my wife, we trying to travel, so I'm going to teach you all I can. So, you can get what you need to get, because I already got mine. So, as it relates to your, original question, I address it by letting them know that it's not always going to be like this. You're not always going to have it where your parents are going to be able to be a crutch for you, to provide for you and get what you always think you're going to get.
And there's levels to it too.
So Charlotte, hold that sure. Point, because I do want you to to make that point. And it brings up another thing, and I want you to think about this as we go to the break. When we look at both of you as not just successful parents, but also as successful people, you are, homeowners, living in a semblance of comfort. And the question that I want you to look at on the other side of the break is, how do you teach your children to be grateful when their parents are successful? Think about that. We're going to talk about that on the other side. So please stay with us. The Original Quiet Storm with Raheem Devon is coming up next on WHUR-FM. This conversation continues on Sirius XM channel 141 in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. We continue our conversation about raising thankful children. My guests are family strategist Charlotte Avery, wife and mother of 7 children, and Randy Pike, youth pastor at Zion Church in Greenbelt, Maryland. Randy and his wife have 3 teenagers. Before the break, we were talking about specifically how to show your children to be thankful, to be grateful when their parents have a modicum of success, where they don't necessarily see struggle in the home. Charlotte?
So that's a really great question because, and this might sound really harsh, but this is really true. So one thing that we tell our children is our success is not your success. You're a benefactor of it.
Wow.
You're a benefactor. You get to be a benefactor of the things that God has given to us to allow us to the gifts and everything that we do. But you're a benefactor. So when you're coming in here, and it's really funny because like your kids actually think you're rich, like they do.
Right.
Like they think that money grows on trees. And I don't care how old your kids are. Your kids, right now my kids are 12 to 21, right? But your kids really think that you're rich. And here's the thing, like we also tell our children, we didn't always live in this house.
Mm-hmm.
We don't mince words with them when it comes to these types of things, because we let them know, when we first got married, we lived in a 2-bedroom condo. And then we had a townhouse that we had 6 kids in. Mm-hmm. And then we moved into this house. But some of our children never remember living because they were so young. Mm-hmm. So this house, for the majority, the house that we live in is the house that they know. And that's great. But we let them know there were levels to this. Like we didn't just get here. We didn't just arrive here. And also too, now that I have an emerging adult who's getting ready to graduate from college, and he talks about how he wants to live, right? And I let him know. I'm like, sir, please understand. No, and I do. I tell him, I said, sir, like if you want to live in a house like this when you graduate from college, I just want you to know that you can, but you'll probably have 9 other roommates. Right. You see what I'm saying? Like we have to let them know. And them being benefactors, we also have to let them know that we're working hard to be able to provide and to grow so that you guys can go to college. We're teaching them how to invest. We're teaching them how to save. We're teaching them, going back to what Pastor Randy said, we're training them up, right? Mm-hmm. But I'm not trying to let them be so blind to the struggle. For instance, y'all know we just went through a government shutdown, right, and all the things. Well, for our children, the ones who think that money grows on trees, which is all of them, we had to let them know, listen, we're in a government shutdown situation. And that means that we don't know when we're going back to work. Mm-hmm. And because we're contractors, we're not getting back pay. Mm-hmm. So that means now we have to stop doing some of the things. We have to stop paying for some. We're cutting off certain things. We cut off, Disney and all that and whatnot. But there were certain things, and they were like, "What? Right. Oh my gosh!" Like they were really like going through it. And I'm like, first of all, you do remember how things went down during the pandemic. Mm-hmm. Now this might not last as long, but we let them know, like now there's a level of sacrifice that we all have to make. I canceled my gym membership.
Right.
I need my
Wow.
gym membership.
I hear
They
you.
need me to need my gym membership just for my sanity.
That's
You
right.
understand what I'm saying?
Yes,
That's right.
you've always said that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, but we let them know we do not. There's certain struggles that might not be any of their business, but there are certain things that are applicable, and we
Yeah.
let them know this is where we are.
Yeah.
You know,
And I think
Yeah.
it's important to like give them just have like make it a norm in the house to talk about like, us doing that is going to take us over our budget for what we allotted for that. Like, like for instance, we allow or allot some in a certain amount of like what is it? Uber drives. Because our kids are in different places. So sometimes we literally have to get an Uber to get them, pick them up. And my youngest, he is like sports everything. And his buddies wanted to go play basketball after practice, mind you. And it was pretty much like, son, we're pretty much at our over budget with our Ubers this month, and he pretty much understood it because he realized that, okay, because I know how money works, he's saying something serious, pretty much like, I can't pay for that right now because I'm over budget. Not that I can or not that I can't. It's just a matter of, this level of spending is this level of spending is outside of what we can do right now based upon what we've allotted for this time frame. And I think having it where you make those conversations a norm in your house, they really can be thankful for what it means to have something, because you're teaching them stuff, I wouldn't necessarily say behind the scenes, but you're bringing them to, quote unquote, to the table with what's going on with the house.
Randy, have you ever had what I would describe with your children a there but for the grace of God go I moment?
Oh, I think you as relates to like having a serious conversation with them about
Well,
it.
just an experience, and let me give you a little context, because my mother taught in the DC public school system for decades, and she always taught east of the river. Okay, Anacostia, Ward 8, and back in the 70s, and one of the things that I remember, and this was specific, it was Moton School over there off of Suitland Parkway, and one of the things that I remember was that there were challenges over there in those communities, and that I saw, when I went to school with my mother. It was, a lot of those folks got that what they still call that good government cheese. There were people that, were it not for some of the deliveries that came to the school, and that that my mom and the other teachers and the administrators passed out to those families, that they would not have eaten. And here we are decades later. I still think about that because I didn't grow up hungry. Okay. But even as a very, very young person, I saw people who might have, were it not for the loving generosity of those teachers and administrators in the school system. And I think that was very impactful to me. And so I'm talking not so much about conversation, but more about experiences where you may be walking down the street and you say to one of your children, "You see that?"
Oh man, absolutely. I am king of pointing out that could be you if you don't. And I know for me, sometimes you gotta have like that one one moment where you just, I don't want to say you gotta go off, but you gotta gently put stuff in a firm perspective. And
firm perspective. That's so nice.
And and I can remember one of my kids. I don't want to say them because I don't want them to be embarrassed. But I remember one of them. He felt like he should have something, and I loved it. Like as soon as he like had his little attitude, we were driving down the street and we saw somebody who was asking for money at the gas station.
Mm-hmm.
And I can recall telling him, I was like this, you keep on thinking that that we just have it all to give and you don't have nothing to do with it. That's gonna be you. You know, you keep on acting like this world revolves around you and you have no contribution to it. That's gonna be you, you know. And so I was pretty much lining it up to say the decisions you make now are going to be that's going to determine where you're going to be in the future. You know, we're the stage now. They're the stage now where their decisions matter. You know, and you know we can't make them for them. And I am constantly drilling down your decisions of what you're going to do now are going to be the 15-year-old you is going to the 35-year-old you, or not even 35, the 21-year-old you is going to benefit or have a consequence of what the 15-year-old you may do. So how are you? Yeah, go ahead, Charlotte.
I agree with that. You know, so one thing that I constantly, and my children, they can like regurgitate this verbatim. And I say to them, there are penalties and rewards for the decisions and the choices that you make. Mm-hmm. You can either reap the reward or you're going to pay the penalty. Mm-hmm. But something's going to happen, right? Mm-hmm. One thing, I want to answer this question that you just asked too, Harold, because one thing that our family does is we do this thing called warm hands, warm hearts. And when our children were about 7 years old, we started packing warm hand, warm heart packs for people in the community who are less fortunate. And then there was a time when we had to just take them there ourselves and our children couldn't come. But as they got older, they were allowed to come into the shelters and things of that nature. And so when they actually started doing community service projects like that and going to shelters and seeing, you know, women and children's shelters and seeing moms and their children coming in and out and seeing what we were doing and where things were going, and who they were going to, it really put a different perspective on how they saw and valued home versus the fact that, you know what, you could be living in a shelter if that, you know, if our circumstances weren't different, if we didn't have a particular job, if, you know, because, you know, we're just saying you're one paycheck short of, you know, being in the same situation. And so we make that very clear for our children, but we make it living for them so that they, and we do it every year, every Christmas and every Thanksgiving. And they go with their dad to get gift cards and underwear and socks and food and all these different things. So, and they get to pass it out because they need to understand that this life that we live is this life. But these people over here, we get to sow. And I believe in the law of reciprocity, and I teach them the law of reciprocity. You know, that when you give, it'll be given back to you. Now, you don't, it might not come back to you in socks and a PlayStation 5 that you gave to somebody else at a shelter, but it'll come back to you. It'll come back to you in health. It'll come back to you in so many different ways. And so that's another way that we teach our children, you know, to have the attitude of gratitude is because blessing other people matters.
So here's the other question to follow up with that. How do you know that what you are teaching them is working? What have you seen in your children? We can take your oldest who is in college. That what are you seeing that in their actions? You know, unprompted, unasked.
Yep.
What have you observed, Charlotte, and then you, Randy?
So I'm not even gonna go to my college student. I'm gonna go to my 14-year-old.
Okay.
A few weeks ago, we were at a grocery store, and actually we were in a shopping center, and I'd gone to pick up some food, and my son saw someone who did not have a home sitting outside in front of the grocery store with a sign or whatever. And he said to me, he said, "Mom, can I go over there and give him some money?" I didn't even know he had any money in his pocket. Right. But he said, but you know what he said to me? He said, I now know why the Lord told me to take this $10 with me out the house.
Mm.
And he went and he gave it to him. And the man was so thankful, and he was just, and it was completely unprompted. It was something that he wanted to do on his own. But the thing that blesses my heart is that all of my children are like that, from the oldest to the youngest. They are people who they would give of themselves, their time, their talents, and their resources to help another person. And it's not something that we have to tell them to do. It's something that when they see someone in need, they want to do it. And I love that for them.
Mm-hmm. I guess I could say from the oldest to the youngest, my oldest, she goes to school, outside of where we live. And when she came home, we all went out to dinner, and the bill came, and she was like, I'm going to take care of it. And I said, wait a minute, what? And, she paid, she paid for the dinner. And, her, it was a thing of, I just wanted to show you guys my appreciation, to show the family my appreciation for, just sacrifices that you guys make. She pretty much was, and not so much of these words, she's pretty much said, I now get it. And, that to me says, you know what, it worked. I'll say for our youngest, he plays basketball for one of the private schools in the area. And, the school doesn't have like a bus system that runs in our area. So I'm the bus driver. And this particular night, they got out of practice late, and, as bus driver parents, we are often waiting in the parking lot for a long time sometimes. And so,
yes.
And so we're my youngest, he don't talk that much, but when he's excited about something, i.e. basketball, he running off at the mouth. And when we get home, he pauses and says, sincerely, he looks at me and says, thank you. And I said, huh? He said, thank you for getting me to practice and getting me home. And I said, okay. He said, no, seriously, thank you. I said, wow, son. I said, you're welcome. In my mind, I'm thinking, where else you want to drive me to? Where else you want me to drive me to?
Yes.
And it's, so to answer your question, Harold, it's working when they're able to, when you're able to see the fruit of what you teach. I'm a pastor. I'm gonna give my little illustration. But you're able to see the fruit of what you teach, and you're also able to pretty much give back some of what you pour out. So I definitely in those two instances. And my middle son, he's always like you, Charlotte. There's I can say that my kids are also, they're giving, but my middle son, he's like on another level of giving. Like we bought these. I bought some Oreos in the house one day. And he said, I want to fry some Oreos. He likes to cook. And so he fried up some Oreos. I'm thinking, man, we about to have some fried Oreos in the house. We get the confectious sugar out and everything. And the next morning, all the Oreos are gone. I was like, man, I guess he was hungry. This boy took a whole box of Oreos to school to share with his friends. And they were the double stuffed Oreos too. I'm saying all that to say, he did all of that just so he could feed his classmates. It wasn't a special treat or anything.
Yes.
I just wanted to cook for them. I was like, man, So it's working by some of the fruit that you see of what you have taught them and how they respond. And I tend to think sometimes too, we as parents, we take so much of the credit when things are going bad, but we take too much of the credit when they're doing good. Sometimes they're just good people, but by no teaching or our own, sometimes our kids are just good people, and so, I'm just thankful that I had we have a small hand to play in what, in my belief system is of what God can do if you just do your part.
Well, see there, I got to give you some pushback where I don't agree with that. I believe that sometimes they see who their parents are.
Mm-hmm.
And if they see that their parents are good people,
Mm-hmm.
they become good people.
Mm-hmm.
And the people who are in their parents' circle
Mm-hmm.
who are also good people, and good parents do their best to keep bad influences away from their children. And so sometimes it's not the direct conversation that you're having with the children,
Mm-hmm.
it is what they see you do when you don't know they're watching.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
And I think
don't know, man. Sometimes though, I don't know, because sometimes you got some real good parents out here that's doing what they supposed to do with their babies. But sometimes, man, you just got that one that like I see my parents doing good, but I want to do this, and it's not like their parents are not good people, or they're not spending time with them, or they're not teaching them things that they want them to do, because I counsel parents all the time with kids. Sometimes it's just that child has a way of doing what they're intrigued by something else other than what's in the home, And,
well, I want to say this though, we are our children's first sphere of influence, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we're not their only sphere of influence.
That's true.
And so what happens is, what I've seen, whether, it's in schools, whether it's children that we have pastored or anything like that, sometimes I see that, the power of influence and social media, because that's a whole nother sphere of influence, right?
Yeah.
So it's not sometimes that we as parents, we have a job, we have an enormous job to do when it comes to our children.
Absolutely.
And we have to believe, especially when you're believers, right, that you are training your children up in the way that they should go. Mm-hmm. So that even when they do go off the rails, they'll come back at some point, right?
Right.
But I think what happens is, it's not so much the parent. It's right now your children are trying to move in a sphere of influence that they think is going to be beneficial to them.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, they get a real mean wake-up call knowing that sphere of influence was not beneficial at all.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think that's when faith comes in, when you have to say, Lord, you know what? I have trained my children up in the way that they should go. I'm continuing to do that. And even though that one has like kind of been going and doing whatever, I know, because you've made me some promises as a parent over my seed and all those things, that they're going to get it together.
Mm-hmm.
I think about it as we are in this Thanksgiving season, and you know how some things just kind of stick with you no matter how long ago they were. And I think I was a new driver. I think I had only been driving for about a year. And Randy, you mentioned Zayres.
Oh yeah.
And it was Thanksgiving Day, and my mother sent me to Zayres in the New Carrollton Shopping Center, because we didn't live far from there.
Chesapeake Bay Seafood House right there too.
Exactly. And I went in, and there was a young sister who was at the cashier, and people were talking about Thanksgiving. Everybody was doing Thanksgiving stuff, and I just happened to ask her. I said, "So, what are you doing for Thanksgiving?" And I will never forget this. She said, I don't know, because I really don't have a place to go for Thanksgiving." And it made me feel so bad. And so, of course, but I didn't do anything about it. And I got in the car, drove home, and I was telling my mother as soon as I got in the door, and I told her what happened. And she said, "Get back in your car, go back to Zayres, and tell her she can come have Thanksgiving with us."
Wow.
But when I got there, she had already gotten off from work. And I think to this day, in 2025, I have never forgotten about that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that when it comes to not only being thankful, but also how you express your gratitude and your kindness is important. I only have a few minutes left, and I just want to ask both of you, and I'll start with you, Randy. What advice would you give parents who are questioning whether or not they're giving the best instruction to make sure their children become thankful adults?
I think that being mindful of the time that you spend with them matters. I think like doing a self-evaluation of what's my word count when I talk to them. Like not even my word count. What am I saying? Sometimes kids get home, and as soon as they get in the home or get in the house, they getting fussed at about something. As soon as they get in the house, like you ain't do this, you ain't do like the conversation is you ain't do, why you ain't, what's going on with that? And not once did you say how you doing, what's going on with your day. Sometimes you have to develop your relationship with your kids in a way where you can break through what it is that you're trying to teach. You know, sometimes there's nothing wrong with having a relationship before rules. Not necessarily saying that rules don't matter, but I want to say that to those parents who may be struggling right now, get to know your babies. You know, like don't let the level of frustration of what you see with them define who they are. So it may be a thing of you being more deliberate with spending time with them. It may be being more deliberate with how you speak with them and what you're asking them to do. You know, sometimes our delivery, can mess things up. You know, we're asking them to do certain things or frustrated with certain things that they do. How's your delivery? You know, they have feelings too. You know, like sometimes they could be having a bad day. You know, sometimes they could be dealing with some anxieties at school that you may not have no idea about. You know, so I think realizing that they're people too, and understanding that they too have feelings and they too have things that you may want to find out and learn if you just stop to listen to them and to have a conversation rather than making demands all the time. You know, that's like I say that's just a small piece.
Charlotte, I'll let you have the last word of advice for parents who are struggling and hoping to develop their children into grateful, thankful adults.
My advice is this: modeling moments matter. It really matters what we model in front of our children. And that doesn't start when they're 15 or when they're 10. It starts when they're really young. And, even though some parents will be like, man, I really didn't start modeling or, and teaching them gratitude early, I want to let them know that all hope is not lost, because you can start developing attitudes of gratitude in your children no matter what age they are.
Yes.
And so please don't beat yourself up. Be gracious to yourself first, and forgive yourself, but just pick it up and run with it and do things and spend and be intentional about how you're modeling and do some things with them together. And even if you are a 2-parent household, even how I say thank you and show the attitude of gratitude to my husband is also modeling that in front of my children. Even if you're co-parenting, you can even, say thank you to the other parent, so that it's being modeled in front of them at all times. But don't beat yourself up, but start now. You can start somewhere.
Yeah, I think that's a great place to end this conversation. Charlotte Avery, Pastor Randy Pike, thank you all so very much. I really appreciate you all taking the time during this busy Thanksgiving week to sit down and impart some big brain, warm hug information to our listeners. So thank you all so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me on, man. Having us on. This was a blessing. Thank you, man.
That is the Daily Drum for this Tuesday, November 25th. I'm Harold Fisher.